Right. So this presentation is in response to a couple of questions I had from Seb when I was showing him how to do the research. And it was about why there was a sudden massive drop in earnings per share in a company he was looking at. And I realized actually we haven't talked about that, or at least not properly with most of you. I think I've mentioned it to a couple if it's come up at the time. So before we get into what a stock split is, let's think about a problem I face on a regular day, and that is the pizza problem. So some of you who don't know me so well will not be aware of this, but I am basically addicted to pepperoni pizza. And I particularly like the really crappy frozen ones from Sainsbury's. You just go and get them from the freezer, and I grate about half a block of cheese onto it and stick it in the oven and basically inject it into my veins. A fun fact, at one point, I lost 11 kilos in a month and a half by cutting cheese out of my diet, and it was basically all of these pizzas. Adam also has a pizza problem. He just doesn't want to admit it. So every time I put a pizza in the oven, he comes meandering through because he smelled it and he goes, "Oh, can I have some?" I obviously want to say no, because for one thing, I cut my pizza into quarters so I can stuff it into my face like a pig. And I don't want to give him a whole quarter of my pizza. But I feel bad. So I'm like, I can give him some, but I don't want to give him the whole quarter. So what can I do? All I do is I cut my quarter into eighths. And now I can give him a little bit less of the pizza and have the rest for myself. Nothing's changed about the pizza overall. It's still one round, frozen, very unhealthy pizza from Sainsbury's, but I can give him a smaller slice of it. Importantly to note, there's a big difference about the slice, and that's the important pepperoni per share metric. There's fewer pepperoni slices on each slice now, and it's a bit of a problem for me. I'd rather have more slices, but we deal with what we've got. The same thing can happen with stocks. Let's say a company's got 100 shares and they're £50 each at the moment on the market. That gives a total value of the company of £5,000. Now, the company the board of directors of the company, in fact, can decide to do a stock split. They can do it at any ratio, but let's say they do a 2-to-1 stock split. What that means is they'll take each share of the company and split it into two. Now, the company hasn't changed. Nothing about the fundamentals have changed, which means the overall price hasn't changed of the company, the overall value. So if we've got 200 shares where before we had 100, the shares are going to half in value. They're going to go from £25 each to £50 each. And again, note, in the same way that when we cut the pizza slice into half, the overall pizza didn't change, well, the overall value of the company hasn't changed. Companies do this specifically to lower the price of the shares. There's a number of reasons they might want to do that, and we're going to look at those now. But first of all, do you want Warren Buffett to manage your money? I would love him to manage my money personally. He's done a fantastic job of it over the last 80 years. He started when he was 11 years old, which is insane. And he's like pushing, 150 now, who can say? And he's worth about 100 billion and his company's worth $500 billion. So if I want Warren to manage my money, it's easy. I can just buy some of his Berkshire Hathaway. It's a publicly traded company. That's what he uses to buy companies, to invest in companies. And I can just leave my money with him and he'll compound it at ridiculous rates for the next however long he lives, 1,000 years. Now that's easy to say, but I can only do it if I've got 400,000 US dollars, because that's roughly what one share in his company is currently worth. That's insane, right? I've never seen a company worth this much per share. But it's not because the company's the biggest company in the world. It's only worth $500 billion. Apple, for example, is worth $2 trillion and its shares are trading at $120 each. So what's happened? Well, most companies, as they grow, do what's called the stock split, and they do it to lower their price so that it's more attractive to investors, more people can get in. Warren Buffett specifically, intentionally, doesn't do stock splits. He only wants people who can put serious money in and who will leave it there for a long time. He doesn't want people trading in and out of it. He doesn't want people buying for a month because they think the earnings are going to spike. He just wants people who want to leave it there for 20 years before they sell it on or die and pass it to their kids. So, what difference does a stock split make to me? Absolutely nothing. It costs me nothing to do. I don't have to do anything. Just one day, I'm going to wake up and where I had one share in my brokerage account, I'm going to have 5 or 10 or 100 or 2, whatever the ratio is of the split. The overall value of my position won't have changed, just the individual price will have dropped. Now, it's important to note that you can't stop this happening. The board of the directors of the company, if they decide to do it, they're going to vote on it and it will happen without your say. You can choose to hold and get your extra shares, or you can choose to sell out, and those are your only options. Now that's in theory. In practice, a little bit happens. First of all, reducing the price increases the liquidity because it's easier to buy in and out. There's more people who can do so. It also increases the number of shares available. That also increases liquidity. That increase in liquidity reduces the bid-ask spread. Now, we've spoken about that briefly before, but basically the amount that people are willing to pay to buy it and the amount people are willing to accept to sell it comes closer together, which means you lose less money as you buy in and sell out. It doesn't matter so much when you're investing, but when you're trading, that makes a difference. It also makes the stock more psychologically attractive. You know, if someone's looking at different shares of a company and they're looking at, say, shares that are priced £10, but there's 10 times more of them, and shares that are priced at £100, well, even though they're basically identical situations, you know, you can buy 10 of the £10 or one of the £100, there's something in our brains that goes, well, we've got more shares and it's cheaper over here. That looks like a better option. There's no sense behind it, but that's often the case with things that happen in the market. This means that actually, after a stock split, there's often a short-term price boost to the company because people just jump in. It looks more attractive to them. More people can trade it. There's also a difference in the annual reports. So this is to the back-to-back annual reports of some company. I can't even remember what it was. I just happened to notice this when I was doing the research with Seb. And you can see here that for the same year in two different reports, the earnings per share are massively different. It's not because the company actually lost huge amounts of money that they didn't report the first time or anything like that. All that's happened is in 2018, they've done a 6-to-1 stock split, which means the earnings per share has been reduced because there's more shares available. That doesn't really matter because if you were holding 1 share before, you'd now be holding 6 and you'd get the same amount of earnings per share overall. But it's important to note that when you're going through your research, this might come up. If it does, drop me a message or drop Chris a message and he'll be able to help you out. It's not difficult to sort. A final note is that there's a reverse split. As you might guess, if a stock split is creating more shares, a reverse split is reducing shares. And companies tend to do this due to listing rules from the exchanges. Most exchanges say you've got to maintain a minimum share price for your company. It tends to be about $1 per share. So if they get below that, they have to do a reverse split, reduce the number of shares, which raises the price rather than reduces it. This is not an infinitely repeatable solution because those same exchanges have rules about the minimum number of shares that you have to have. It tends to be about 1 million shares. So after a certain while, if your company is really doing terribly, you will be delisted. But that's how we get charts that look like this. This is for, I think, a pharmaceutical company, Y10, if I remember correctly. They're trading currently at about $12.50. And at one point, they had the equivalent of $67,000 per share. It wouldn't have been showing that at the time. What this is showing us is they've done repeated reverse splits because their company value keeps dropping too low. And so now it's the equivalent. It would have been the equivalent of trading at 67,000 at the time. This is probably not going to come up, reverse splits, in stuff that you're researching because it's going to really be happening with crappy companies that keep getting sold into, and probably won't be, it won't be an important thing for companies you're researching because they won't be doing that badly. Does any of that not make sense? Does anyone have any questions about what went on there?